Hi, everyone. This is Ray Lufkin, and I am so excited today for our interview with wonderful creative activist, woman who dares, Shanta Lee Gander. Now, before I tell you a little about her, I just want to give you a little introduction why we're doing this. I had done an interview, I had done a series in 2016, and I haven't done one since, but I felt it was imperative right now that women speak up. Their voices need to be heard, and in so many different ways. So this gathering is really about women working at the intersection of art, health, and social change. And I do believe that Shanta fits all that criteria. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. She is a writer, a photographer, a journalist. Her work has been featured all over the Massachusetts Review, Prism, Internet, Literary Magazine, Palette Poetry, et cetera, et cetera. I heard about her on Ms. Magazine. I had read something she had written and I looked her up. And what for me was your vision. That was the thing that intrigued me the most. And I'm just going to paraphrase it, and then I think we'll jump into our conversation if that's okay. What is someone's story under the surface? What should be reclaimed? I have an endless hunger to ask questions, create conversation through visual or written journey into the unknown, even what on earth scares me. So tell me about your vision and your why. Why are you doing the work you're doing?
So as a child, what I was most inspired by, it's going to sound odd. I was not really allowed to ask questions. It was the whole environment of children seen, not heard. And so my processes went internal in terms of seeing things, noticing things, taking it all in. Moments where I would be in smoke-filled rooms and adults would turn to me and say, "Did you hear that?" And I'd say, "Nope." And they'd go back to whatever they were saying. "Oh, she's so good." Da, 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 da. And I'm thinking, okay, like, can a writer or a creative have any better material than literally being the human fly on the wall? I'm not saying that was ideal by any means, but what it really did for me is a couple of things. Like it trained me into secrecy and when to say, what to say, how I say what I was seeing or wasn't seeing. But also for me, I think the discovery point came when I started writing stuff down, like knew that I could keep my own journals, knew that I could almost be like a reporter, like the journalist before I ever knew there was such a thing, you know.
When did you start journaling? How old were you?
I was between the ages, I want to say, of 12 and 13 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't start journaling until I was 35. So
Yeah. Yeah. So it was this, for me, and also right now, I would say a lot of my work is driven by, okay, I haven't done that before. I'm not afraid by, something I haven't done before. Either dive in or find some people who know about it or just try it out, see what happens.
well, I know you had a series about the idea of disasters happening and, working on that. I mean, you've done a lot of different things.
Oh yeah, so that's going to be rescheduled, but I called it Beautiful Failures. And the idea, sometimes I think we're more afraid of the failure that never happened than actually just trying it. And sometimes we're also afraid of the success that could happen.
Right. I think that's a bigger piece almost for most people in the creative world.
Yes.
It's that fear of, and I think there's a lot of fear. It's like expectations of other people. Will I surpass my role model? Will my parents approve? When I was writing my books, it's like, they're still alive and I'm going to talk about being abused, and there's still people in the family who need to hear this, but it's always trying to juggle that kind of, information. And so there was a lot more fear than most people realize, especially when you want to tell a story of something that's hidden behind the secrets and those, that facade of the family all worked out and it's beautiful and we're all happy and whatever it is. And there's a lot of hidden crap going on. And how do you share those secrets without also alienating the people you love and respect?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that, that can't be underestimated. For me, I feel like I spent so much time as a child not being able to voice or express my curiosity, that I kind of owe it to myself to put that into some form of words, either for myself or for the world or for some community, um, to see it. My almost beholden to myself
Mm.
first.
Yeah, I think also you're young enough that you're in a different place than I am. I'm 71, so there was no internet. There was nobody
Yeah,
telling you, oh, go express yourself. In my
yeah.
family, it was whatever secrets stay here. That's it. And you
Well,
don't
that's how
talk
I was
about it.
raised. But that's how I was raised too. So technically, what I'm doing totally bucks on how I was raised. I was raised, you never air dirty laundry.
Right.
To a point where, so when I was a little girl, we lost our home. We were homeless, bouncing around from hotel to hotel. I was going to school as if nothing had happened,
Mm,
like almost just you say nothing. When my father was in the Gulf War, go to school as if nothing had happened, nothing was happening, nothing to see here,
right.
which so for me, and so I'll tell you, I still am challenged by this whole world where and instantaneously you put your thoughts out. I personally don't believe in doing that. I personally am like, okay, well, there's some things just for you. There's some things just for a smaller group, because I remember what that time was before
Mhm.
all this. And then there are some things that, hey, express it to people. I self monitor a lot, for partly because I'm a journalist too.
Right, right. You are trained in a different way of expressing yourself and worrying about that. I think when I told my secret, it was really tough. I mean, my knees were shaking and, I didn't tell
Mm,
anybody anything
mm,
until I was in my 20s,
mm,
and my abuse happened from age 7 to 13. So,
mm.
it was, those secrets and how do you get them out and then sharing them. And it was a
Yes.
long journey to do that. But I felt like I had to make sense of what happened to me to share that with others so they didn't experience that aloneness, that there was hope. If I can get through this, you can get through this. And I think that's a lot of what writers do, artists do in sharing these very deep personal traumas that they've experienced.
Mhm. Or yeah, definitely. It's one of those things, or you show people places where they may never go. So, breaking into abandoned asylums for me, or an abandoned place where a lot of adults either, I'm not going to say they're not interested, maybe it didn't occur to them, or maybe they say they did that when they were teenagers, or time, whatever. And I like to consider myself someone who literally does go beneath the surface and show people things,
Mm-hmm.
whether they will get there or not.
I also think there's something, it is what's behind the curtain, that magic, whether it's
Mhm.
the Wizard of Oz. I mean, in my
Yes.
photographs over the years, I took them people, what's behind the door, people standing in windows, trying to
Mm,
imagine what their lives were like and
mhm.
what's going on there. Because I needed to do that to also expand my vision of what my life could be, because I was so limited in when I started, it was like, oh my God, am I ever going to be different? Is anything going to change? I'm going to be this victim forever, and I
Mhm.
didn't want that for myself. So I spent a lot of time doing photography in the beginning,
Mhm.
exploring those things. And in my own personal paintings, I had my pain pieces, which I called them, which were all the dark ones and the black and white and the grays and stuff. And then I noticed when I was healing, when I could start imagining other stories and scenarios coming out. I
Mhm.
had this one piece that I did with these feel no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, and there were different squares within it, and this person's trying to break out, and there were all the other stories that were going on, whether it was the war, somebody dealing with cancer, whatever. So I had all these different experiences, and then it was like, wow, there are other stories to tell, and gives the bigger, broader vision.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
tell me about your latest book of poetry that you won this award for, and it's very exciting. And tell us about it.
So it's Ghetto Claustrophobia, Dreaming of Mama While Trying to Speak Woman in Woke Tongues. And it came out this past June. diode additions. And so the book really deals with memory, trying to make sense of certain things, but also dealing with imagination. There's one stages and lessons in development from a butterfly. And so that looking at science and nature, something that I discovered about butterflies, certain species of butterflies, which I did not know, they can be quite vicious. So yeah, like quite vicious, like some of them, depending on what stage they're at, can mask and be taken into like I think it was like an ant colony or something. And then that's their meal. They tricked these ants, or this colony got dragged in, and then they massacre, all these different things. And I thought about what it was like to grow up and be a girl, and how there are all these landmines for a woman's body, being trained in the language of what is and is not yours, from an early age, all the way to being pressured into giving hugs. I think our language has changed now in terms of how we do that.
Mhm.
But growing up, I remember being pressured and forced to give adults access to my body before I knew that that was or was not okay, but also amid the mixed language of good touch, bad touch. So also the book represents the first time I ever had, I explored place and where I was from in the form of poetry. I do it in prose, in my prose project that I'm working on now, but I've not really done it in poetry. Like it would like make some appearances, but not really. And so this book represents the first time I've done that.
Now let's talk about, okay, you've got so many projects going on in so many different arenas. Let's talk a little bit about your photography.
Absolutely.
And so why don't you tell people a little bit about it, and also where they can see it so that they have access to it?
Yeah. So my photography, there's some highlights on my website, shantaleegander.com. And right now, the exhibit that I'm working with is Dark Goddess, which I would say that project's really 6 years old. It's really older than this moment of now, which is true of a lot of creative processes, right? So it's right now on view at the Southern Vermont Arts Center. And it was my collaboration really with all these different individuals to explore who or what they saw of themselves, exploring the other realm of the sacred feminine, of the dark goddess, whether they wanted to dive deeper into their cultural heritage, whether they wanted to make up something mythic, the myth of the self, or getting into the biomythic. So it's a whole range, and my work covers all sorts of things. Like I said, one of my main things I love to do is go into abandoned places and photograph. I have a body of work related to India during my 5 months there. So yeah, those
When
are some.
did you go to India, and what prompted you to go there?
So it's a really good question. It was late 2011 going into 2012. Went with a former husband, and really part of it had to do with, and the way that I was so much a people pleaser. It was something he always wanted to do. And also, traveling the world was also on my agenda, but I really was excited to say, I can make this happen for both of us. My contract ended. I was contracted with the New Haven Health Department, and contract ended. My car died on the highway just around that happened. I contacted the bank and I just said, hey, come get your car. I cannot afford the payments anymore. I can't do the payments. I don't have a job. And they were like, this is not how this works. I said, well, this is how it's going to work. Come tow your car. And
Bravo.
so, come get your car. Cause I just told them myself, I said, look, I can't afford this anymore and I'm out of work. Didn't know what was going to happen. And we decided to leave the United States for 5 months. Had a couple of people take over the rent in the apartment. I really didn't know how this was going to all work and play out, and spent 5 months in another country. It was the first time. It wasn't my first time leaving the country, but by that time that was my second time leaving the country. So I was very new to leaving the country and felt like I was old and just getting to the party. And it was an opportunity. I'm like, okay, 5 months. But it also showed me that I could do travel like that in other spurts, spend a month somewhere, which I did later, went to Cuba.
Okay.
For a month.
I think travel is really important for personal growth.
Yes.
For also seeing a worldview that is not ours, for listening and having conversations across the board with people about what is, and seeing beauty and culture everywhere, So travel has always been a passion. Obviously, I haven't traveled recently, and I have grandchildren now who are like 10 years old and down. And so I spend a lot more time going there than traveling around the world. But I used to do like a month at a time, a month in New Zealand, a month in the south of France, whatever, Italy, those kinds of things. And I love it, and I think every time I've gone, when I was really young, I could pretend to be anybody and try on new personalities, and see, who am I?
Yeah.
Who do I want to be? What characteristics, that was part of it. And then when I got older, it was all about exploration. It is about spending time with myself and other people and other cultures and seeing where are we similar and where are we dissimilar.
And also, and stepping out of ourselves, right? Because there is something what you're saying I resonate with deeply is getting out of our own way. Even if I can't speak the language very well, I'm not expecting them to speak English necessarily, because there's a whole problem with that, right? It dominates. But just to have the experience and be a visitor, but also I also like to travel in ways where I'm not a traveler, where I get to actually try to somehow really be in the culture.
Well, that's why I would go for a month and I stay in one place, and then I take day trips or a weekend trip.
Yes.
So the last time I did a big one, I'd gone to Spain, and I did that. I went to Morocco for a few days. I went to Gibraltar.
I've never been to Spain. That's on my list.
Okay, well, I want to go back because I didn't hit Barcelona. I was only in the south.
Did you ever running with the bulls and all of that?
Yeah, so, but I still would like to go back and do that. And also to Portugal, I didn't do that. But, I think just what you're saying, it's because you've immersed yourself in the culture. When I had gone to Spain, it was over Christmas, which they don't celebrate on Christmas days. We know it. Yeah. But they had parades. And what I loved is they threw candy, and everybody had their umbrellas upside down and were catching candy, during the parade. I mean, there were little things like that. But then, the day after they had their, people still shopping or going back, and just, it was like seeing the icons coming down, in parades that I would never see, and stuff like that. It was incredible. And I think that's the other piece. When you can stay a long time and get through some of their, special moments, like their holidays, and you get to see it too, so, but children were children. They were as excited. It didn't matter where you are. Children are children, and they want to laugh and play and eat candy. So, and stuff. So I wanted to ask you, and I didn't know about this. You did this work for this, for the state of Vermont about economic and cultural growth using in the creative sector.
Oh, yeah. So I partnered with the Vermont Arts Council, which is statewide, and I worked with a team of people. And so I was one of the contributors, and I enjoyed it so much, and I really believe in it. because one of the things we know is, the economics are tied to the creative, whether people are spending money to see a play, whether they're spending money to come in for a weekend because they have to see an exhibition, or they go to a place because they love the vibe of the creativity, their creative placemaking. I think it's in everything that we do. And as an art, so I'm also a person who also I have an MFA and I have an MBA. And I think a lot about the ties to strategy and vision and, economics. And I think there's so many through lines to economics, including how, and I think one of the problems in the country in general as a culture is how do we actually nurture and feed our creatives as opposed to the persistent mythology of the starving artist. Artists do not want to starve. They want to be paid, and they want or get something. What is the exchange? What is the something? That is the return on their investment for time and energy for creating.
Well, and I think too, you broadened my eyes when I was reading the report, about how you define the economic sector, because it wasn't just the artists, it was the space, it's the people who worked in the space, and even the restaurants that supported the community where the theater was. And I was like, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way.
It's the person pushing the broom. It's the person who is cleaning the space, and they care so much about being a part of it, and they see themselves as a part of it, which we forget. It's the person who is doing the fundraising and who is not the chief curator, but they're doing the fundraising to keep the institution going, right? So there are so many different pathways into what we say when we say the creative sector.
Right. And that's what I love, because it opened my eyes, and I'm like, wow, every community should have one of those impact studies and figure out ways to support, communities and go forward, because you've got a lot of smaller communities that may not have a lot of money, but how else can they look at this and bring in, or, and it may be that the person who has the brewery, that they right in their community, that could be an open web, and let's support it by having some local artists come and either perform, do poetry, have their work on the wall. There are so many other ways and I think that's part of what's happened with COVID, because, where do you exhibit your work? At least in the last year and a half, if people weren't going to museums.
Well, and also too, it's funny you say, so I've been someone who's telecommuted for 20 plus years.
Okay.
I am pre-Zoom. I've been on Skype. My office was wherever I worked, because I created and implemented Planned Parenthood of Southern New England statewide internship program. And it was a rare model I created. I believe it's still in play now in Connecticut. But I also, at the same time, was working for Trinity College and created and implemented an academic mentoring program. So I was very, not really in the office, sometimes in the office doing my work wherever I was. And I am pro flexibility for people to create. I am pro us being creative about how because COVID's not going anywhere. Let's just face that. It's not going anywhere. And it's been horrible for the lives lost. Yes. But let's also think about this as an opportunity. Let's think about the ways that the virtual can be a space. So a lot of people have been saying, oh, it's not the same. It's not the same. I'm like, actually, I reject that, because I've made so many connections online alone, in moments when I didn't have a car, and moments when I couldn't even really easily travel around New England because I lacked a vehicle at the time, right? And so I turned to different tools. I said, oh yeah, the internet, I can join these different groups. I can see where these groups of creatives are online. And it really does broaden the view. And you're right. I think that, so in Vermont for me has felt phobic about technology. I think we're starting to get, better about that. But some individuals feel phobic about it. I'm thinking, no, for us to, also be in paradise and have access to the world outside, and have the world outside have access to us and see things. I think it's a great thing. I partnered with the Vermont Arts Council. They turned their spotlight gallery. So it was the second time I'd co-curated with them for the I Am exhibition. And it was the first time that the exhibition went totally online. And we did.
Tell people what the I Am exhibition is.
Sure, absolutely. So I Am is a part of the I Am a Vermonter series. And it started, I want to say January 2019. That sounds about right. January 2019. And so Kira, who was formerly with the Vermont Arts Council, she's retired, tapped me to collaborate. So that fall 2019, we pulled from some of the profiles, like invited individuals who had those profiles across diversities, all these diversities of age, ethnicity, et cetera, what have you, engaging around their creative process, engaging around what it meant to create and be in the space of Vermont. Sometimes whether or not they wanted to talk about identities as a part of that too, and intersectionality. So fast forward, I want to say last November, December, they reached out again asking if I'd like to collaborate. So before COVID, I was in the process of bringing that exhibition experience to Southern Vermont, but COVID happened. I was like, I'm not so sure I want to go pick up all this art all around the state, bring it to, galleries. I'm not sure about that. And so I started thinking about, okay, how could I do this online? What would that be like? They reached out. I said, oh my God, I would love to do this. And we did 3 events where artists got to do a deeper dive. That included one main event where artists got to introduce themselves or show images. And we built the Vermont Arts Council built an online gallery for people to experience. It was up for 3 months.
That's fabulous. And I think that's a model that a lot of people can adopt and still will, going forward, so yeah.
And it allows you to be able to, again, yes, it's not like I would never suggest that anyone go take the virtual reality tour of Versailles. Like, no, don't do that. But, if you want to go tune in and like listen to some music, or, you might get a sense of someone's dance piece. I think there's an opportunity there.
Well, I know for myself, I did a lot of theater pieces. I like theater. And so I got to see a lot from London and things that I would not see, otherwise. I was like, wow, okay, I'm getting to see that, which if we didn't have COVID, it wouldn't have been online, that kind of thing.
I think cultural institutions should think about that, because there's a way. I love Sally Mann. And I saw her give, I think it was, MoMA, at the MoMA, she gave a talk, but it was online. I was able to sit in my living room and see it. Pre-COVID times, I would have been trying to figure out, or maybe I would have missed it because I wouldn't have known about it, or whatever the case is. And, I thought about it. I said, wow, for people either who cannot afford it, because going to New York is really expensive, right? Can't afford it, or work schedule doesn't permit it, or what have you. We should keep this idea of the hybrid. It doesn't need to be.
It's a both and. It doesn't have to
both and. Yeah. It doesn't need to be. It's the virtual versus. No, it's not. It's an and.
Right. I agree. There are just things like Felshi. But now I'm drawing a blank. I'll come to me. But this guy's in Italy, and he does all these things. He did like Gershwin and stuff like Hirschfelder. Yeah. And so I watched something from Italy, that I wouldn't see otherwise. Those kind of things. The concert, and he's telling about his life, and and it's like, wow, that was so cool. And what I found too, there's like, I would not have looked at Carnegie Mellon. It's just not in my backyard. Never really thought about it. But I started, sort of perusing some of their art. And then I also found out they've had this series of art and meditation. And so they would share a piece of art and talk about it, and then have a meditation go with it. I was like, wow, I really like that. Something that clicked, I think I could do that with people too, kind of thing. So
it's a great tool, because there are a lot of people who've been bemoaning about being stuck online, stuck on screen. I'm like, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, personally, let's just talk about it from the environmental standpoint of you're not driving as much, not a lot of energy put in. I put in a lot of energy driving because I'm like watching, trying to avoid an accident, all this stuff. With being able to just go to your screen and engage, and then people get to take a break, and then people don't feel like they're held hostage in a room. I think there are so many mixes of things. And of course, as someone who has performed in person, whether it's belly dance, whether it's poetry or reading, there is something real you get from an audience. That is true.
Right. I just had a discussion with somebody about that. He was calling it conceptual art when you have people, on stage and they sit down and they read to you or something. And I'm thinking, I said, for me, sometimes you dim the lights, you just hear the words and it changes the energy and you hear it a different way rather than just looking at somebody, because then you're stuck on the way they dress.
Images. Yeah. Like there's a reading I did. I didn't even call it a reading in the marketing. And my husband and I, we co-produced it. It was called Voices. We did it for a couple of years in a row. But the fire of the first time was never the same. Like the first time that was it, should have been it. We ran it for 2 nights in a small theater in Brattleboro. And we encouraged people. The rule was you can do your pieces, but think about doing them paired with images. Think about acting them out, and I did not call it a reading. It wasn't a reading, and people did all sorts of stuff. And multisensorial.
Right. Which is what, I think TEDx talks have helped, because you're getting to see people in 10 minutes, tell a story. And oftentimes it can be, there was a woman who was at Shands Hospital and she's dancing across the stage because she's talking about how dance can affect people's Alzheimer's and things like that. So I love that kind of stuff where I think that's broadened our definition of a talk as well. Yeah.
Yes. And I think there's something about thinking about all the ways we can tap into a sensorial experience for someone, either with words or paired with photography. So what I did this summer, is I had, as one of my book launch readings, I paired it with film. I partnered with an organization and a chocolatier, a local chocolatier. They commissioned a chocolatier to make a special piece of chocolate based off one of my poems.
Love it.
They ate it. Like as I was reading the poem, they ate the chocolate, and it was this sort of like special thing. I thought it was the most awesome thing. So thinking about how can we really tap into that creative energy, it is our birthright. Just everybody has access to it, whether it's how you dress or what kind of makeup you want to, or if you're not into that, maybe you're planning a dinner party for, small group of people, right? A very small group of people. How are you thinking about tapping into that creative energy?
Right. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that chocolate, because I have a program called Chocolate Creativity and Connections. And when I did it live, I used to bring in a chocolatier to bring in chocolate and talk about it as a metaphor for passion. And, going back into our stories, what did we, when was the first time we experienced this? Was it grandma cooking, baking chocolate chip cookies, our beloved bringing us a box of chocolates for Valentine's, all those kind of stories, and then starting to get people into that space and saying, that's what creativity is born, in that kind of passion, and then go on from there. But yeah, so I totally get that. I think that it's such an important, we have to be multisensory, in what we do and how we present ourselves and everything we do. So I love that.
Yeah. And also people don't always necessarily sense the world through the mode that we're giving to them.
Right.
If someone cannot see, but they can hear, if someone cannot hear, or, I think, and also I do subscribe to the idea, I do think we're all neurodiverse in our different ways. So, what are the different modalities for helping individuals experience what you're bringing to them. And that's also not to be confused with thinking that you can reach everybody, because someone, your work may not be someone's cup of tea, and that's totally fine too.
I agree. So I have a couple more questions because I want to honor your time. So what book are you reading now? What book has just intrigued you or gotten your interest?
Okay, so I am one that if someone saw my nightstand, they'd be like, what's going on with you? Because I have like these books everywhere sprawling. The one that has held my attention and that I've been afraid to end until a friend told me there's a whole universe of it, a graphic novel. And it is Sandman, the Sandman series by Neil Gaiman. And it's all about the idea that the god of dreams, or dream, has been captured. This guy was trying to end death for humanity and caught death's brother instead. And there's all this whole thing. There's Neil Gaiman, it's deeply literary. There's a lot of historical references. It goes on and on and on and on. And, there are also all these depths of engagement in terms of, what really happens with the idea of the dream or capturing it. Or there's this whole trope about the muse where there's one character who tried to hold one of the muses hostage, and what happens to that character. And so this whole idea, and also the question of, well, what would you do with forever if you could just live? Shakespeare makes an appearance, if you could just live, what would that be like? And what do you do with your time as time passes? There are all these different layers and experiences.
So what came up for you? I mean, I love this question. If you had forever. So what?
God. Oh, it's funny because I love vampires.
Okay.
I love vampires. And when I was little, or maybe creeping into adulthood, wanted to be one. And they just look cool. They always seem to have the best fashion, the best. So if I had forever, it would feel, it's funny because you keep thinking, even in the lesson from Interview with the Vampire, Anne Rice, the book,
right?
It can feel, and the trope is always the same, where if you had forever, eventually you'd get bored. Eventually all your friends die out. Eventually this living forever wouldn't feel great. And you still would have to behave in the way that mortal time acts, which means you better make good use of your time. But I would like to believe that if that was an option, that I would feel less stressed to get things done within a span of time. And even that's not promised. I'd feel like it was more of a sure thing. Okay. I think I just wanted to be a vampire when I was younger, because it felt like a sure thing. That's something you can count on. You're not going to die. Well, unless someone drives a stake through you. It's
right. That's a really interesting thought. Okay. So, all right. So let's talk about, we're talking about the end of your life, and you've got so much you want to do. So what is the legacy you would like to leave for people?
Oh my God.
For yourself, for your community? What is it?
Oh my God. I don't know if I see myself in that realm of greatness to think of legacy. So I hope maybe there's one person or group of people who would want to either pass my books along, buy a piece of art, and maybe it changes hands through time and it becomes something else in the future. Legacy.
How do you want to be known and remembered?
Okay. You know what? I would. Okay. So, in my greatest of fantasies, I would love to be the person that became famous or in the realm of fame for encouraging and inspiring curiosity in whatever way that meant. Curiosity within oneself, curiosity for one's surroundings, curiosity about one's life, or curiosity to dig backwards, present, forwards. I want to be the one that enchanted people to go beneath the surface.
Oh,
If I am to be so lucky, if I were to be so bold, and if I were to be lucky to be famous, I would like that to be something where just be curious as the very simple, just a very simple form, whatever that means for you. Just be curious.
that's great. I love that. I think that's a really important thing because curiosity is how we change life, how
And
we
also,
find solutions, how we think.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and also never to assume we have the answer, because I mean, there's so many questions to ask, and not to assume that we know, even in giving an opinion, knowing that that can change,
mhm.
knowing that that could change, even if you feel so strongly about it now.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. So we are going to end our time today on that note. I do have one thing I want to say. Um, that this is one of my favorite quotes, and it's "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much" by Helen Keller. And I feel like, you just gave us some great ideas what we can do together to collaborate in community, to build a strong creative community and economic, system. And so thank you so much. And I so appreciate you being here. And I hope you all will come back and listen to some other wonderful women who dare. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ray.
You're welcome.